the shadows they wander along, old ruins where fears have grown, eyes that watch from ancient stone, whispers chill right to the bone. Gothic castles rise in the night, ghostly figures glide out of sight, wolf howling under pale moonlight, darkness creeps and grabs too tight. You have fallen into the EuroCrypt. There is no escape from the EuroCrypt. Fog curling through cobblestone streets, footsteps echoing heartbeats, vampires hunt their nightly feast, lurking monsters are released. Silent scream in a sepia dream, melancholy miles downstream, no one's safe or so it seems, worlds unravel at the seams. You have fallen into the EuroCrypt. There is no escape from the EuroCrypt. Fallen into the EuroCrypt. There is no escape from the EuroCrypt.
All right, man.
Hey, what's up, guys?
We're back. It's been a couple weeks on both channels. We've been gone, so kind of taking a hiatus. There needed a little break, but today we got Troy Howarth with us, man. Good to have you on, man.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're doing a retrospective on Claus Kinsky, and Troy wrote this book, man. The films of Claus Kinsky covers like his whole filmography, pretty much, is a lot of his life, and
yeah,
some wild stuff, man. And I got the link in the description. Anybody that's interested, check it out. But yeah, good to get you on once again.
It's always fun to talk about Klaus.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah, and just looking at, but first time I've seen some of these films, and man, some of the backstories. It's great to have the book. I know. I think they go hand in hand, and that book does actually make some of these films more enjoyable for me, just knowing everything that's gone on in the backstory, which will come on to some of these films anyway. But the guy's whole life, he packed like almost like 10 lives into one, and he died sadly in only the age of 65. But yeah, what a man, what a performer, absolutely superb.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, I was going to say, I mean, he's definitely one of the most peculiar and charismatic actors in screen history, a completely unique screen presence. I mean, somebody who just, you can't help it. Your eye just goes straight to him. He's one of those actors. It doesn't matter if he's playing a large role, a small role, whatever. You can't help but take notice of him. As a human being, I mean, not maybe not somebody we would have liked to have met or spent time with, or entrusted our daughters or our sisters in his care. But as an actor, with an extraordinary screen presence, and that's what I tried to do in my book about him. Real Depravities was kind of focused more on his work as an actor as opposed to all of the, the scandals, the rumors. Also, because a lot of the stuff is very one-sided. The man is dead, and I think we can safely say probably a fair amount of what was said is probably true. But it's his legacy as an actor that I wanted to focus on. So that was kind of the purpose behind the book.
Right. And that's something that I'm curious, because I've been listening to Herzog, and I almost feel like he might be equally as insane, but not as verbal, you know. Maybe he contained his insanity a little more, but I call bullshit on some of that stuff. Like, I don't know. I could be wrong. It's just a gut instinct. Some of the things he takes credit for, but I don't know, like, of Klaus, you know.
He'll say he's not clinically insane, which is probably technically accurate. Kinski was indeed diagnosed as being schizophrenic at one point in the 50s. He attempted suicide, ended up in a sanitarium, and spent some time there, and apparently was diagnosed. So I think there's a lot to be said about that. I mean, in terms of, you know, the things that he's alleged to have done, the things that perhaps he did or did not do. A more sympathetic way of portraying it would say the man had issues, undoubtedly, but there were other aspects at play too in his personality. So Herzog, I think, and Kinski brought out the best in each other.
Yeah,
they brought out the worst of each other in some respects, but the fact of the matter is that they continued to collaborate over a period of 15 years on a series of 5 films, all of which are well worth seeing, several of which I think are masterpieces. And you know, there is this sort of resentment on Kinski's part towards Herzog, in the sense that Herzog is the one who's really responsible for transforming Kinski from a kind of cult film actor into a bona fide celebrity, worldwide, well-regarded, revered international superstar. It's because of the Herzog films. So I think Kinski always had kind of an ambivalence about that and didn't really like to give Herzog too much credit. But at the same time, Herzog undoubtedly has a flair for the dramatic and for telling stories. And I don't think we can take either of them as necessarily entirely reliable narrators when it comes to the things that happen between them.
Right. Yeah. So with Kinski's autobiography, a lot of it has been, well, Herzog has pretty much put a lot of it saying it's lies, and he's trying to spice up his life to, you know, become more interesting. But I was going to start, you know, so he was born on October the 18th, 1926. And it was in a part of Poland, I believe, but Germany at the time, but now it's been part of Poland.
Right.
It's kind of, we're not sure what happened when he joined the war, joined the army, because some sources say that he was caught by the British. Some say he just fled the Germans in the front line. So there's kind of always like been two kind of stories to that. What would your take be on that, Troy?
It's a little murky, and I don't know that we can state definitively. Some people have indicated that he was indeed a card-carrying Nazi. Other people, no. I mean, so he definitely. You have to understand that during the war, you know, not everybody in Germany was on the side of Hitler and the National Socialist Party. So there were a lot of people that were sort of drafted into service against their will. They didn't necessarily really want to do it. There were people who definitely rebelled against it and, joined the resistance and, did their part to try and shelter Jews and, do things to try and stem the tide of the awful things that were happening. There were a lot of people who just got sort of swept up into madness. And it was just a very, very disgraceful event altogether, a terrible chapter in history. But Kinski, during that period of time, apparently was in the military. And the story goes that he was captured. He ended up spending a good chunk of the war in a English, not a concentration camp, but a POW camp, where that's where a lot of his kind of interest in theatrics and putting on plays and things like that were involved, because very often the prisoners would put on plays. You can see things like that in Billy Wilder's Stalag 17, which deals with American POWs behind enemy lines and the way that they would pass the time playing games and, sometimes indeed putting on plays, and all that's definitely true. So I don't know that we're ever going to know definitively exactly what happened there, but that is at least the official version that he signed off on.
And I thought it was funny listening to watching My Best Fiend by Herzog, the documentary, where he's talking about, they were in the same boarding house, and he's trapped himself in a bathroom, screaming for 48 hours straight and smashing the bathroom to pieces, and it's pretty interesting documentary though.
It's a great documentary. Again, Herzog has a flair for telling stories, and I do think some of that's a little exaggerated, but I think a lot of it, there's a lot of truth in it. I think probably to a certain extent he's embellishing a little bit to make it more entertaining.
Yeah, 48 hours straight, that's kind of hard to believe. A little bit, but damn. So
there's kind of conflict over his early life as well, because he said that he was poor. Yeah, his father was worked in a pharmacy, his mother was like a seamstress. And he said he used to basically go out and try and pinch, so they could eat.
He kind of tries to put a kind of Dickensian twist on his childhood, like it's something out of Oliver Twist. And I think his family did go through financial hardship. They did move at one point, and during the war, I think the income definitely shut off, and things did get a little tight. They did get a little lean for a while. But most of his autobiography, really, anybody who knew him, anybody who's ever really commented on it has emphasized that a lot of it is just fictional. Herzog claimed that they got together and they would, invent stories, and maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But I think Kinsky, Herzog did say Kinsky came to him at one point and said, "Listen, if I just write a book that says that we get along and we love each other and we work together very well, nobody's going to want to read it. The scum, they want to read about conflict. So let's
they want to know the controversial shit." Right. And he was saying that what was it? Oh shit, my mind just went blank. Holy shit. My bad, y'all.
No, but like you say with it, he pretty much he doted on his father, I was reading. And he don't really mention his mother a lot in the autobiography. But he kind of got his temper, I was reading as well, from his mother. She was very temperamental, and his father was kind of like laid back, and he'd take the brunt of his mother's type of mouth at times and that. But he grew up with 3 siblings as well, and there's kind of the one older sister, they had some kind of sexual attraction with each other, and it's touched upon. No one really knows how far that went.
Yeah, they don't know how far it went or whatever. Yeah.
Controversy kind of straight early on in his life as well, and boy, man, did it keep going.
Well, he was very hypersexual. I mean, definitely, whether or not he's exaggerating in his book, and I suspect he is, the man was obsessed with sex throughout his life, and certainly as he became famous, he did have a weird kind of appeal. I've even seen, in terms of women that I've known and have interacted with online in the real world, who see pictures of him sometimes and they're like, ooh, to me, not a conventionally attractive person at all, but there was something about him, maybe that bad boy kind of thing that he had going for him, that sort of rebellious thing that some people find to be very attractive. But he claimed a lot. He was, in the autobiography, which is downright pornographic at times, talking about various different exploits, and he made a lot of claims about having sexual relationships with people, many of whom later said that wasn't true, and there was lawsuits and litigation, and the autobiography was later edited and redacted, and names
That's
were
what I was going to ask
changed.
you. Is that original cut is pretty much banned, right? I mean,
it's around. You can find it. It's called "All I Need Is Love," but the ironically the censored version is called Kinski Uncut. Well, it's not, because but he makes all kinds of scandalous allegations in there about people like Marlene Dietrich and Roman Polanski and various other people, and there was a lot of getting the red pen out and saying, no, we can't be having this, so they had to change it and water it down. But even in the watered down version, it's very graphic, and it's a great page turner. Whether or not it's accurate or not, in a way, is almost irrelevant, because I can assure you, I read a lot of, I love autobiographies and I love biographies, and I've never read one that was more compulsively page turning than that one. You just didn't want to put it down.
oh wow.
Ooh.
Would you match his intensity, could you match? Could you think of any other actors that matches Kinski's intensity though? Like,
I've mentioned before that I find it interesting. Nowadays, physically, somebody like Steve Buscemi comes to mind. I can see a kind of resemblance between them. But in terms of intensity, it's interesting that Werner Herzog has made, I believe, 3 movies with Michael Shannon at this point, because I think they have a very similar intensity.
That's very true. Yeah.
My son, what have you done? And Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans, and Salt and Fire, they did together. And there's definitely something similar there. There aren't many people who have that. I mean, in Italy, you could point maybe to somebody like Gianmaria Volonté. Of course, they appear together in For a Few Dollars More. So that's a nice kind of,
I did go back.
Titan.
Yeah, I went back and watched that because that might be the first time I ever saw Klaus Kinski in a movie. And I
might
do
have been mine
remember,
too.
and I do remember as a kid seeing Venom.
Yeah,
very young. I saw it probably on USA, Commander USA, or whatever.
Yeah, those were 2 of my first as well. Actually, I can't remember which one. I mean, I didn't like Westerns as a child. I was all into horror movies, monster movies, things like that. That's what I really liked as a child. So my brother and I used to have to kind of share a VCR for a long time. So if I would watch something, he would watch something. And anytime he watched one of those Sergio Leone Westerns, it used to just absolutely drive me nuts because they seemed to go on for 3 days and, people standing around staring at each other while the music builds. And I love them now, but at the time I couldn't stand it. So that may have been the first one I saw. If it wasn't that one, it was probably Venom. Yeah, that was definitely early on as well.
Right. Yeah.
And that's got another Madman itself in it as well, with Oliver Reed and some of the actors that he used to get up to too.
I wish we had behind the scenes footage, because they did not like each other one bit. They had very different personalities, but they were both, talk about intense. Oliver Reed had that too.
Yeah.
Oh God, that's what he reminds me of, Kinski. Yeah.
Yeah. I was trying to think of some. I was thinking maybe Daniel Day-Lewis, maybe.
In a different way. Yeah, he has that. He definitely is a very charismatic actor, great actor. But what a world of difference between Klaus Kinski and Daniel Day-Lewis. Daniel Day-Lewis has cultivated a very small, very carefully chosen filmography where you can tell he cares very deeply about what he attaches his name to. Kinski didn't care. I mean, if you paid him enough money, he was there.
He was the prostitute, right? As he said.
Pretty much.
He called himself, he said, yeah, I'm essentially a whore. I work for money. So, yeah, right. Famously, he would turn down big directors, big projects, and do these little, sometimes crappy movies because they were willing to pay him well.
Right. So he started off his film career in 1948 with a bit part in Morituri. Mm-hmm. But for me, he came into his own when he started doing a lot of the krimis in the 60s.
Yeah.
He did. I was looking, something like 10, 11, maybe 12 Edgar Wallace films. So I was going to ask you, Troy, I know you like Creature with a Blue Hand a lot, which I saw this week and loved. Can you name a couple more of his early krimi films that you would recommend?
Dead Eyes of London is a big one. That's one of the more readily available ones. That's been on 1001 sort of cheapo DVD releases, but it's really good. I like that one a lot. They kind of blend together a little bit. I hate to say it. I mean, there's so many of them that were done over a relatively compressed period of time, so it's hard for me to remember it. There was one called The Indian Scarf. That was a fun one. The Door with Seven Locks. That's another good one. He's in one that has a really good cast. It's not really one of the stronger ones, but I have affection for it, called Circus of Fear, where he's in it with Christopher Lee and Leo Genn and,
I do want to
Susie
check
Kendall.
Yeah.
It's a fun little movie. I like that one. That was a British-German co-production. So that one's very entertaining. And, German-British co-production. Another one he did was directed by Freddie Francis called Trader's Gate. That one's pretty good, which is all about a plot to steal the crown jewels. So he's in that. And, they're all worth looking at. I think Kinski would say they were all shit. But he said that about 99.9. Actually, I don't think he said much good about anything apart from his own movie, Paganini. He didn't really say anything good about anything. So
and I just ordered that, by the way, because I was like, that's the only film he directed. That's his last film, right? I believe, too. So
Yeah, that was his last film.
Yeah, I got it coming from Vinegar Syndrome, so I want to see what's up. You know, I know, and he thought he was Paganini, right? Like, or something. Or
he claimed. I mean, he definitely. I don't know. Like I said, obviously the man had serious mental health issues. They got worse as time went on. I suspect in the 1980s there were probably other things. There were substances that were very, very common, especially among the film industry and people who had access to lots of money. I suspect that added to it during the 80s. He definitely got worse during that time. He said he believed it. He found a little paperback book about Paganini in a bookshop. At one point, he was with the producer, Augusto Caminito, and found this book and became obsessed. And he was going to make Paganini because he was Paganini reincarnated.
Yeah.
Film is an interesting film. It's indescribable. You can't expect it to be a typical kind of biopic or a typical narrative movie. It just isn't that way. It's a very, very strange film, but it's worth seeing.
Yeah, I saw where Herzog was saying that it wasn't filmable after he read the script, but after what happened on Cobra Verde, he probably just didn't want anything to do with him.
Well, there again, this is the contradictory nature of Kinski. Kinski would say, "Oh, Herzog's a hack. He's no good. The only reason that the movies that we did together are any good is because I imposed my vision on it. If Herzog was free to just make movies without me, they would be laughable." Which, of course, is completely untrue. He made many great films without Kinski, but he would say he was disparaging him. Oh, he's a hack. He's just this lousy, cretinous creature, and he's just I despise him. But then he takes his passion project to Herzog and says, "Please direct this." And Herzog turned him down multiple times, said, "No, there's just no way." First of all, as you quite rightly point out, things just fell out after Cobra Verde. That was it. No more of that. But also the script he had written, there was just no way you could make a coherent movie out of it. And he was right.
Right.
I do have sorry. I was going to say
I do have a clip that I pieced some of his outbursts together.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like almost 2 minutes. So, but it's, I'll go ahead and play it so people can, if nobody knows who Klaus Kinsky is, y'all can kind of get an idea.
Yeah.
Right here. So.
Schrei ich oder schrei ich nicht? Und du sagst es mir nicht, aber ich schreie aber nicht. Leg mich doch am Arsch weg. Der Moment ist überhaupt gekommen. Mal schlag ich in die Fresse. Hast du dich verlassen, du. Diesmal sitze ich in dem Kostüm. Der scheiß Karre in Holland.
Mach zu, mach zu.
Ich zusammen, du. Nur. Wenn du zu frech wirst. Das ist mit eurer Freundschaft. Ich möchte deinen Dreck. Wir brauchen einen Fotografen. Verstehst du? Na, mach doch deinen Scheiß. So ein Geisteskranker. Gluck ist so ein Geisteskranker. Komm, schaff den weg hier, diese Scheiße hier.
Kriegst du nichts mehr zu fressen. Kannst du deine eigene Scheiße fressen.
Ich will eine Ruhe haben. Es gibt jetzt zwei Möglichkeiten. Entweder die nicht zu dem Gesindel gehören, schmeißen die anderen raus, oder sie haben ihr Geld umsonst bezahlt.
Du jetzt hierher, der so ein großes Maul hat.
Christus war, soviel ich weiß, duldsam. Und wenn ihm einer widersprochen hat, dann hat er versucht, ihn zu überzeugen. Hat nie gesagt, halt deine Schnauze.
Nein, er hat nicht gesagt, halt die Schnauze. Er hat eine Peitsche genommen und hat ihm in die Fresse gehauen. Das hat er gemacht. Du dumme Sau. Und das kann dir auch passieren.
Why do you work together?
Because he's crazy, and so I am. That's why.
It's a perfect combination of the mad people.
Nein! Nein! Nein!
We go as far as possible. So that's why I didn't even need to tell him to tell Werner, don't stop it before I break down. He wouldn't stop anyway.
Directors, I have no relationship to a director. I have no relationship to any director in the world, but I hate them. I just hate them. I mean, physically, I'm allergic,
Sweet as sweet can be.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 2 minutes. That could have been like 2 hours, really. If you put
I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot out there.
Well, the thing to be said about him is that, like most people now, whether nowadays, if they would look at, his condition and say, was he indeed schizophrenic or was he perhaps bipolar?
Right.
Bipolar covers a wide array of different sort of extremes of emotions. And there's bipolar 1, bipolar 2. If indeed he was bipolar or if he was schizophrenic or whatever, we see these crazy outbursts and we think, well, this is what he's like all the time. Actually, he wasn't. People have said he could be very, very sweet. He loved animals, for example. There was a story that Herbert Lom told about working with him in a movie in the mid-'60s called Our Man in Marrakesh. It was a Harry Alan Towers movie produced by Harry Alan Towers and directed by Don Sharp, and has like Tony Randall and Senta Berger and Terry Thomas. And Kinski's in the film, and apparently at one point they were staying in this hotel, and the way the hotel was set up, there was like a dining area, and a lot of stray cats were around. Cats would come in and go out, and apparently at one point a waiter kicked the cat, and Kinski saw that, and he went over and he threw the guy up against the wall, and he said, "If you ever do that again, you'll have to come through me," you know. And so I can respect that because I love animals. And so he definitely had his sweet side to him. Maria Rome told me the same thing, said he could be just an absolute sweetheart, soft-spoken, quiet, thoughtful. Claudia Cardinelli talks about him in the Herzog documentary about he was so shy with her. He would send her like little notes, and he was very respectful and very courteous. So it just kind of depended on his mood the day that you got him. And as far as with directors, how they treated him.
And the actress from Wojciech, is that who you're talking about? Or
what?
The actress that's in Wojciech?
Wojciech, no, that's Eva Matis, but she also had a good time with him. But Claudia Cardinelli was in Fitzcarraldo, you know, that was, again, she said he was just wonderful. So it depends, but there are other women who said he basically sexually assaulted them. So, I mean, it depends. It depends.
I heard a few things. It was pretty wild, like the sex scene where they, you know, slipped it in or stuff. Like,
oh no, he did some horrible things apparently, and I have no reason to believe that all of these things are made up. I don't know about all of them. Some of the stories are pretty despicable if they're true, you know. But again, this is why it's necessary sometimes to separate the artist from the art. I mean, I may not have wanted to spend time with him, but boy, do I love watching him.
Right. So you've only got to see, he did an interview on Letterman that's widely available on YouTube. And he's just charming, like laid back. He comes across, you know, laughing, joking. But you
compare his clip on Letterman to Oliver Reed. When Oliver Reed went on and was drunk and belligerent and everything else. And there was Kinski, very sort of soft-spoken, a little weird. You know, he was obviously a strange guy, but very sweet. So, There
you can see why, like, the sex appeal with the women as well. He had a phase with a lot of his co-stars, didn't he? I know the young girl Donna Wilkes in Schizoid. He was pretty much having an affair with her, and that was kind of strange because they played like daughter and father,
daughter,
on screen. But so there's that. But he could turn on the charm pretty much, you know. Whenever
I've seen some shots with I think it was Herzog that was filming it where it was just him and a butterfly.
Yes.
It was just like I couldn't find it, you know, where I could get it to put it on the stream, or I would have. But
no, it's a sweet little moment. I mean, I'm sure it was to a certain extent staged, but it's really sweet, and it does show again that side of him. I mean, you know, Herzog's attitude was always, people would ask him, "My God, why do you keep working with him? He's such a nightmare." He said, "I don't care about behind the scenes. What matters is what's on screen." And he knew he was something special. You know, as we were talking about his career trajectory, the first big kind of important phases are the Krimi films, undoubtedly. Those are the movies that kind of made him into a big name in Germany. But then gradually you start getting into other things, especially something like Dr. Zhivago, which starts to get him a little bit more international recognition. Well, even bearing in mind, back in the 50s, he worked with Douglas Sirk on a film called A Time to Live, A Time to Die, and had, you know, been in some slightly more prestigious films. But basically, the Krimi films were the ones that kind of made him into a star in Germany in terms of films.
Would you say that Dr. Zhivago catapulted him bigger than For a Few Dollars More, or?
Right around the same time, they were really during that same time frame, and I mean the combination of the two was enormous. I mean, he doesn't have large roles in either film. The advantage that he has in Dr. Zhivago is it's his own voice. whereas he's dubbed in For a Few Dollars More, as he is in just about every single Italian film. Well, almost every single Italian film he ever did. The German films, the German films were shot with direct sound in German, but when it came time to do the dubs, he would never do them. And the reason he didn't do them was he expected to be paid ridiculous sums of money. So a lot of his movies, you can't really hear his voice, but he has this great scene on a train with, he's sharing the scene with people like Ralph Richardson, great titan of the British theater and great film actor. And he's just, you can't not look at him. He's fantastic. He has this little scene that's just very memorable. And then For a Few Dollars More, because that film ultimately did get distributed internationally, it didn't come over here right away. I think people forget in the U.S. it took until, I think, 1967 for those Leone movies to come out over here, and they put them all out in rapid succession, whereas originally they were out 64, 65, and 66 in Italy. So, those two films were very important.
I did get to see In God Said to Cain, and I really liked that one. That was it's got kind of, I was looked up somewhere. Somebody was saying it was a horror movie, but I don't get that vibe at all.
Oh, I do. I think it's one of those films. I mean, I wouldn't classify it as a horror film, but it's one of those gothic westerns. There were a few in the late 60s, like Django the Bastard and God Said to Cain, that have, they're not horror films as such, but they have kind of a gothic supernatural vibe to them. I mean, there's something very supernatural about it in God Said to Cain that's very interesting, which in turn, I mean, I don't know that this was a conscious influence or he ever saw them, but Clint Eastwood did something similar later with High Plains Drifter and Pale Rider.
Pale Rider, yeah.
The Italian Westerns were the next big thing. After the Crimi films, when he goes to Italy and starts doing the Westerns, he became a huge star in Italy and made a ton of money and a lot of movies there.
He did three bangers, didn't he? Started on his Westerns. So he did Leone's For a Few Dollars More, Damiani's A Bullet for the General, and Capucci's The Great Silence. But he did, he was commenting on, as they went on, he said they got shittier and shittier, and just, he kind of got a bit of disdain for them in the end. But, to start off with such three great films, but I guess that's the same with all the genres, really, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. But even before that, he'd done a couple of German ones, which were pretty good. I can't remember the title off the top of my head, like The Road to Santa Cruz or Last Voyage, something like that, Santa Cruz, with Mario Adorf, which is a pretty good film. He did one of the Winnetow films as well, the Karl May Westerns that were very popular in the 1960s. So, yeah, he did some of the very, very best Italian Westerns, and he did some awful ones too. He did a bunch of things for like Demofilo Fidani, these really cheapy Westerns. But, usually he's not in them very much. He's billed prominently, but usually he has cameos. So with the exception of the occasional film like in God Said to Cain or The Great Silence or Shoot the Living, Pray for the Dead, usually you get just a little bit of Klaus. He's in one of those. I don't think it's the very first Sartana movie. The very first one wasn't really called Sartana, but Sartana was a supporting character. And then they made the first one where he's like the protagonist. I forget the title. Because they're so. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
The Sartana films, wasn't Fabio Testi in those and Nero as well? I haven't seen them. I need to check them out. But
Sartana started with Gianni Garco, and then George Hilton did some later ones. There may have been some knockoff ones where maybe somebody like Fabio Testi did them. But the first one, the first kind of official one, where Sartana is like the draw. Kinsky's in it, but he's in it super briefly. He just shows up in a little cameo.
You blink, you miss him, right?
Pretty much, yeah. And that's often the case with the Westerns. So it's one of the things, again, I tried to do in the book was talk about the film, but also talk about how does Kinski fare in this? It's a little tiny part. He doesn't have much to do. He kind of phones it in here or whatever. But even when he's phoning it in, he's just, you can't help. Again, I keep hitting the same point again and again, but he just cannot take your eyes off of him.
Yeah, absolutely. He did go on to do one of my favorite Jallo films, Double Face. I know you're a big fan of that one, Troy. Yeah, sure. That was Riccardo Freda. And then, but he didn't do that many Jallos, did he? I think he maybe done two. He's done Death Smiles on a Murderer with Joe D'Amato.
Yeah, I don't classify that one as a giallo myself.
I don't either.
Some people do. There's certainly Double Face, which is also Krimi because it's part of the Krimi series. It's a German-Italian production. So there is like an Edgar Wallace version that has the typical Edgar Wallace opening, which is a shorter version, but the Italian version has all the nudity in it and all that fun stuff. So the only other one that comes to mind, I mean, he did do a couple of Westerns that have strong giallo elements. Actually, even for a few dollars more, has a giallo streak to it. That doesn't get talked about very much, but the whole flashback thing, the primal trauma, the little fractured flashbacks that go the whole way through the film, that's a very strong giallo element. Okay. But also, he did Slaughter Hotel for Fernando de Leo.
Yeah, yeah, that's one of my favorites.
He's barely in. He's not really in it. I mean, he's in it, but he's, you see him smoking a lot. Like
he's peppered throughout, but short bits and pieces. So that was probably a movie that was shot in like 2 weeks or so. It was a cheap movie. Yeah. But yeah, he probably wasn't on the film for very long. Yeah, he's mostly standing around smoking. Anytime he ever played a mental health professional, he's like the worst psychiatrist in the world, whether it's here or Buddy Buddy for Billy Wilder or, schizoid. I mean, would you trust this man to be your psychiatrist?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. They're living in this asylum in Slaughter Hotel, and you've got axes on the wall and like weapons everywhere.
No, it's crazy. It's a crazy movie. And you can tell DeLeo didn't take it seriously at all. So it's a little bit, it's over the top. It's like a comic strip. That's the fun of it. I mean, you've got Kinski as a lousy psychiatrist. You got the tortured implements all over the walls. Rizal Benaria is an infomaniac. How can you not enjoy this? But it's completely preposterous.
Hell yeah. And I think it's funny. I think it's funny on Jess Franco casting him, in Count Dracula, like not telling him he's in the Dracula film, right?
Yeah, that's apparently true because Franco talked about that. Harry Allen Towers talked about that. Maria Rome talked about that as well. For whatever reason, given the fact he was willing to do any piece of garbage that was offered to him if the money was right, he didn't want to do a Dracula movie. Yet he goes on to play Dracula in Nosferatu.
Right.
But at that time he was like, no, I don't want to do it. I think he was pissed off at Harry Allen Towers because the first of the Harry Allen Towers, Jess Franco, Klaus Kinski movies was Justine, where he plays the Marquis de Sade and he's barely in it. He's like, again, peppered through the movie, little cutaways to him in the cell, scribbling away. Voiceover narration, not by him. It's actually by Jack Palance, who's in the movie playing a completely different part. But
that's
because
that's my favorite Franco.
Oh, really? Okay. No, it's a good one. I love Venus and Furs. I think that's a masterpiece. But
yeah, I like that one.
But in Germany, it was sold as Klaus Kinski in Justine, and he was pissed off about that apparently because it was a small part and he didn't think that was right. So, but apparently it's true, and they shot his scenes separate from everybody else. His scenes were shot in Italy because that's where he was working so much at the time. And Franco told a funny story about that. He said he always got along with Kinski. He never had any problems with him. He never had any fights or whatever. But Kinski came in to do his stuff in Dracula and took a look at the set and said, what's up with this shitty set? You're supposed to be a modern director. Why don't we film in a real insane asylum? And Franco just deadpan, well, the idea of doing that did occur to me, but I was afraid that if we went in, they would never let you out. So Kinski laughed at that, and they got along just fine.
I did see this week his version of Jack the Ripper, Jess Franco's with Kinski. I kind of liked it. I thought it was the way it, like, atmospheric, the way it kind of got the foggy streets of London and all that. I think Kinski's not bad in that role either. No. I know they kind of play on the fact that Jack the Ripper's mother was literally a whore, and he kind of, that's what got him into kind of killing. But yeah, I highly recommend that, to people. There's one scene in the park as well when he's stalking this girl in the park, which is really kind of almost Jallo-like. It's shot late at night.
Yeah, I think that's Lena Romay, Franco's partner and muse in so many movies. It's almost a little bit of a he's called Dr. Orloff in the film, so it all goes back to Franco with the awful Dr. Orloff and everything. I mean, they just, within the last week or two, said DNA has proved who Jack the Ripper really was. I don't know if it's really accurate or not, but
I've seen that. Aaron Kaminsky. The
Yes.
Polish hairdresser,
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's been all these theories about who it is. Jack the Ripper, the Jess
Right.
Franco film, should not be approached as like a historical film.
Oh,
it's
no.
it's an entertaining horror film.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely. Yeah.
But no. So, what's your opinion? I wanted to ask you. You've seen. I haven't seen all the Kinski. I've seen maybe close to 20 of his films. You know, or films that he was in. And so, what would you say like his most insane performance? Like for me, out of the ones I've seen, is like Wojciech, and it's just one scene in particular. It is. I was just like, and I didn't know, man. I was blown away by that damn intensity in that murder scene. I'll just say that I'm not spoiling it for anybody.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, I think that's probably his greatest performance, honestly, is either that one or Nosferatu.
Okay.
To two Herzog films
Crazy.
that were shot back to back, very different films. Wojciech was based on a play, and Herzog does it in a very, the fixed camera setups and long shots, and it's an approach that doesn't work for everybody, but I like it a lot. I think it works, and Kinski is just extraordinary in it. Then you have Nosferatu, which is a much more kind of ambitious, sprawling type of film, and obviously Kinski, in full prosthetics as Count Dracula, because by the time they made Nosferatu in 79, the cat was out of the bag for a long time that it was an adaptation of Dracula. So Herzog figured, well, might as well just change all the names back, as opposed to when Murnau did it in 21 for the film that came out in 22, where they changed all the names because it was an unauthorized adaptation. Those are probably my two favorite performances of his. I mean,
okay,
insane is oh my God. I mean, you could point to so many things, but certainly that explosion, because that's the other thing about the film is he's so contained and tightly coiled throughout that movie. He's playing this sort of sad, pitiable, put upon character who's treated badly.
Yeah,
the whole way through. He's treated like shit by his superiors, and his wife is cheating on him, and it's terrible.
Yeah.
And when he finally explodes, it's like, that's cathartic, and it's very, very strong.
Yeah, you can see it in his eyes. So it's like, holy, I mean, and in so many roles, you see like this deep, sad pain or shit through his eyes all the time. Like almost every role that I've seen. And I know, what he's got, how many films is it, like 200 films? Close to it?
Yeah.
I forget the total. It wasn't nearly as much as some people made out. Herzog said he was like in 400 films. That's not even close to true. It was somewhere in the upper 100s, I believe.
Okay.
Not also including TV appearances, of course, and obviously did a lot of theater work and poetry readings and things like that. Audio recordings of Shakespeare and Francois Villon and various other people at different stages in his career. He wasn't as prolific an actor as Christopher Lee or Donald Pleasance or John Carradine, for example, but he didn't live as long as them either. I mean, Christopher Lee made it to his 93rd birthday. Donald Pleasance died a little younger than he probably should have done. He was only 75. And John Carradine, who seemed like he was about 300, he was in his 80s. Kinski died at 65. So, and he also didn't work for the last few years of his life either. So he did pack a lot in, but not as prolific as some people have indicated.
There were some women that lived near him. I've seen, I'm not sure which, might have been on, it was a documentary, Creation is Violence or something.
You mean the Nosferatu in Venice disc where the lady that ran the post office and her daughter?
Yeah.
That's a beautiful piece, because it's these are two people completely disconnected from the film industry who didn't even really know who he was. It's just literally the lady that ran the post office, and her daughter worked there helping her. And they said he was just so sweet, so kind. Yeah. This was when he was living in California. That's where he lived in his last years. He lived like out in the mountains, kind of a recluse. And I think I'm right in saying he was dead for a couple of days before they realized that he was gone. But he had this kind of ongoing, very sweet relationship with them. It's nice to hear stories like that, because you hear about all the crazy stuff.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I was blown. I was kind of like, whoa, and the first time seeing Aguirre, holy shit, man. Damn. I can't believe I hadn't seen it sooner, but I was for what was accomplished to make that film and everything. Like
it was a relatively low budget movie. Herzog, it was early in his career. He'd only made a couple of feature films before it, like Even Dwarfs Started Small and Signs of oh my God, I can't remember the title right now, but he'd only made a handful of films, and this was kind of a bigger project for him. And obviously it's an ambitious story. It involved going down and filming in the Amazonian rainforest, and and they're filming in Peru on Machu Picchu and these incredible out of the way locations. Kinsky's a big star. He's the biggest, most expensive part of the budget. And crucially, he's in the whole film, which isn't always the case. So he's there in almost every scene. I first saw the film. I went actually, it was a double bill with My Best Fiend at the Pittsburgh Filmmakers back in the late 90s.
Okay.
I went to see it with some friends. It was 16 millimeter print that wasn't in great condition, but I was just like, oh my God, it just absolutely blew me away. I just recently revisited it. Shout put out a 4K recently, and I watched that. It's one of my 10 favorite films of all time. As you can see, I have the poster behind me.
I didn't know all this. Like you've been on here a few times with us, and I didn't know what that was, but now I do. But the story with him and Herzog, about the story about him trying to leave the set, and Herzog saying, "I got 9 bullets, and I'm gonna put 8 through your head, and one's gonna be for me." And
that's the story. That's the story. It could be. It's hard to say. I know that it was a situation of if Kinski had left the film, and this was part of the thing whenever he hired him, there were always people were aware of the fact that Kinski could be very capricious in his behavior, and sometimes he would just break contracts, and he would pull out of things. He would agree to things, and he would pull out. If he had abandoned that film, the movie would have been pretty much completely ruined, because he is the whole way through. It's very important. You can't just shoot around him. And the story goes that that Herzog made this announcement to him that I've got this bullet here, I've got this revolver. I think it was 6 bullets. I've got 5 that are going to go into your head, and then one's going to go into mine.
Okay.
Is it true? I don't know. It's a great story though.
Right. And he supposedly he shot Kinski shot 3 rounds into a tent of like 45 extras and shot one of their fingertips off or something so.
Yeah. I can't remember if that was on Aguirre or if that was on Fitzcarraldo. It may have been on Aguirre, but he was apparently they were unwinding after work, and everybody was sort of drinking and having a good time and singing, and he was trying to sleep, and he got angry, and he just fired some shots, not expecting to hurt anybody, and he shot somebody's fingertip. It could have been a lot worse. Not to say getting shot in the finger is
that's pretty
good.
That's pretty crazy. 45 people, you only shoot a fingertip off.
Lucky.
The story to that film is incredible as well, because didn't it Herzog pinch a camera to even start making it?
Yeah. That's what
and like you say,
he said it's not. He said he didn't steal it, as it was borrowed.
Borrowed, was it?
But then he made other films with it, so I don't know.
Well, I think that was at the beginning of his career, because he'd already done he'd done a couple of features, he'd done several documentaries, and I think the way he put it, he felt he had like a God-given right to the tools of his profession. So he appropriated a camera from some Munich film school, I think, and used it. So he probably did use it on this film. Again, it was a cheap movie. Kinski was the only really kind of big cost associated with it. There's the costumes and everything, but it was done very cheap on location in the jungle. And again, because of the way the movie was shot, and because it was a low budget affair, you don't hear Kinski's voice on the soundtrack of either the English or the German dub. They had to get somebody else to revoice him because they couldn't use any audio from shooting in the jungle.
Right. Didn't they lose the film as well at some point, the negative?
I think that's true.
Airport, I think it was.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't, Herzog wouldn't tell any of the cast members, so they carried on filming. And they just got lucky. It just turned up at some airport. Which is crazy. But it didn't do. Did it do well? That film, it It did well in France, I believe, in '75, but it was
No, it
released
did well.
a year.
It did well.
Okay.
It got a. I mean, we're not talking Spielberg bonanza, but this is a very different period of film. This is the early '70s. It comes out in '72. I mean, the big movie that year is The Godfather. So no, it didn't do Godfather business.
Yeah.
But it did well. It got a lot of attention. It was extremely well reviewed. It got a lot of prizes at various different festivals. And again, because Kinski was coming from this series of, low budget Edgar Wallace films, low budget Italian Westerns, here all of a sudden he's doing this film for this major new German auteur filmmaker. He was all of a sudden it was elevated him to the next level, and he became, he started to become a much bigger deal internationally.
And he was coming off that Jesus Christ Savior tour as well, which went horribly wrong. So he was kind of angry anyway when he got to do that film.
Well, he played a very angry Jesus.
Yeah, that's very distorted Jesus.
Yeah,
I would say, but
I mean, yeah.
Have you watched?
And, at one point, he's just getting all comers to come up on stage, and then he kind of goes to the end of the stage, and he's talking to like this handful of people. He orders people to kick people out. He's chucking people off the stage. You got a bouncer coming on. It is just like panic.
Yeah, there's a sort of documentary film built around it, Jesus Christ Savior or something like that, which I do talk about in the book. And yeah, it's something. I mean, everybody got their money's worth, I think. I mean, you certainly had an interesting night out of the theater. People were yelling at him, saying, this isn't Jesus. Jesus is about forgiveness. And he said, what about, he went into the marketplace and he tore things apart. And yeah, he was something. He definitely, he played by his own rules.
That got caught. So they were going to do 100 dates, but because of all the controversy and all that, I think he literally had to just abandon that tour at one point.
He's so confrontational though. Right. So,
well, Herzog said he came to Aguirre as kind of a dejected, disappointed Jesus. So, yeah.
Right.
So his next film for Herzog was Nosferatu the Vampyre, 1979. This was the first time I'd seen this one. Man, the atmosphere in this is superb. Like the performances, I think I've not seen like Dirk. I've not seen loads of his films, but it's hard to say anything's better than his performance in this one. I was blown away, to be honest.
Yeah, actually, the second one was Wojciech. They did that real quick.
Okay.
And then because you can tell because he has stubbly hair there, he still has hair because he's playing sort of a military figure. So they gave him a bit of a crew cut, and then he shaved his head and he did Nosferatu. And I think Nosferatu. I mean, first of all, just late last year, Robert Eggers puts out his version of Nosferatu. And this is the only film that I can think of where a great film has been remade twice as great films, I think. Yes. I loved all three of them.
Absolutely.
And I think Herzog's Nosferatu, I mean, bearing in mind the Murnau film is a masterpiece. It's an extraordinary film. But I think Herzog's is the best vampire film I've ever seen. I've seen quite a few. So I can say I certainly rank it very, very highly among my favorite films. Atmosphere is extraordinary. The use of music, the use of the landscape, and this sort of weird, haunting, melancholy performance that Kinski gives, which is not the kind of snarling, bestial Count Dracula of Christopher Lee, but a much more kind of lonely, sad, but not the kind of wispy kind of Gary Oldman type Dracula later, where it's all about mooning over his lost love and everything. He's a bloodsucker, he's a parasite, but he's been around for a long time. He's bored with it all, and he's just basically very, very lonely. So he's simultaneously kind of repulsive, but also oddly, weirdly, slightly sympathetic.
And of course you've got Isabella Gianni as well, superb in that role.
Hell yeah.
As his love interest.
Isabella Gianni and Bruno Ganz as Jonathan Harker, wonderful as well. I mean, it's just I love that movie. You got to be in the right headspace to watch it. And if you're expecting a fast-paced kind of throat-ripping vampire movie, please stay away from it because it's not that type of movie.
It's gothic, like gothic film lovers are appreciated. I'll say,
It's slow. It's very, very slow, but it's never boring. It's just, you got to get into that rhythm. If you can go with that rhythm. There's that great scene where Bruno Ganz is walking across the countryside and the Wagner music is building on the soundtrack in the sky. The clouds are coming over and it's getting darker and darker. And he holds on to that until the entire sky is filled with darkness. Like he doesn't rush it. He just lets it play out as the music builds. That takes confidence. And that's a great filmmaker right there. So I have nothing but love for that movie.
Oh yeah. So you did like the Eggers Nosferatu, you said?
I loved it. I thought it was great. I mean, I'd hate to try and rank them because they're just all three of them are great. It's never happened before that I can think of. I mean, calling various different versions of Dracula a remake is problematic because, like, what does the Terence Fisher version have to do with the Todd Browning version? Absolutely nothing. But you're talking Nosferatu is a very specific film, and each time it's been remade specifically by these people. They both made magnificent movies out of it.
Absolutely. I think Eggers nailed it though. I really do. I mean, I went, and I don't go to the theater twice usually, but I went twice for that to go see it.
I did too.
It was my favorite film from last year. So.
Number 2 for me behind The Substance, but very close number 2. And I would have gone to see it more times if the weather hadn't turned so bad around here. So unfortunately, I'm glad I was able to cram in 2 viewings, but it's a beautiful film. My 4K should be arriving tomorrow, and I'm so excited to revisit it.
I got mine in. Finally got it in. I got to check out the 4 extra minutes or whatever. But
yeah. Well, I don't know if it makes a big difference, but I'm excited to watch it.
Right. But sorry for straying off the subject.
No, I was going to say Kinski actually won the German equivalent of the Academy Award for his role in Nosferatu. Yeah. So it came out and it was critically acclaimed and everything.
Oh yeah.
Critically acclaimed.
Go on, sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. Critically acclaimed, commercially not so much. It was funny because it came out the same year. There were 3 very different big Dracula movies that came out. The 2 biggest ones were the Herzog film, which of course had 20th Century Fox involved. It was a German French co-production. Fox is involved, and it was a bigger film. And then there was the John Badham version with Frank Langella and Laurence Olivier and Donald Pleasance, which was a Universal film. And those were bigger films, and they both underperformed. They weren't commercially terribly successful. The big one was Love at First Bite with George Hamilton, which I think is a very funny movie.
I remember as a kid seeing that though. Like my mother loved that movie, played it.
I like it. I like it a lot. I think it's very funny. It's very funny, but it was Dracula for the disco era, but bringing him into New York City. He's out there trying to integrate into society. He's wearing his usual sort of opera clothes and trying to, get into the discotheques and stuff. It's a funny movie, but that was the tenor of the time. Whereas the Badham and Herzog films were kind of commercially slightly disappointing.
I mean, it's been forever since I've seen it. But one thing that I do remember, he drinks the blood of a bum that's drunk or something. He gets drunk and he's flying. Mm-hmm. I do remember that. But yeah. Good stuff.
So I was going to mention Fitzcarraldo and some of the story to this as well. How this got made is crazy, man.
Well, crazy. You mentioned the My Best Fiend documentary, which of course touches on that in great detail. But there's also a documentary by Les Blank called Burden of Dreams, which is all about the making of Fitzcarraldo. Which of course it started off with Jason Robards. And Mick Jagger and Mario Adorf, all in the cast. And Mario Adorf was cast as the captain of the ship. Mick Jagger plays a character who's no longer in the film as it is now, where Jason Robards was Fitzcarraldo, who was good casting in the sense the character is meant to be an Irishman. Well, Kinski isn't very Irish. Jason Robards we could accept in that context, but in the original version, he had kind of a mentally unstable assistant played by Mick Jagger. But the movie was done in such terribly, very difficult circumstances. At one point, Jason Robards became very ill and he had to go back to the U.S. for treatment. And his doctor said, he's not allowed to come back. Some people said he just invented that because he couldn't take it. He got out of there. Maybe he made it up. I don't know. Mario Adorf literally jumped ship. He decided he didn't want to do it. So Herzog for years and years has been like, those Jason Robards and Mario Adorf, they're not real actors. Well, I beg to differ. They certainly are. But
definitely.
Mick Jagger had to bail because he had a Rolling Stone tour.
Yeah.
So he had to bail. And so Kinski gets brought into the mix. And he takes over the role. And Herzog said initially he was so sweet. He was so wonderful. He was so easy at first, but then it changed as it went on. And the movie was just.
I guess he don't get along with the jungle too well. To be somebody, a self-proclaimed naturalist. You know what I mean?
Oh,
well,
man, yeah.
It's tough. It's tough. I mean, you're literally. He does it for real. It's kind of like what William Friedkin did with Sorcerer, where he refused to do like process shots and go. I mean, he wanted to bring those trucks over those rickety bridges. He did it for real. And it's the same thing here. These are not miniatures. This is not a toy boat being hauled over a miniature mountain. It's the real thing. Make of that what you will, but nobody else in the world would do that. It's an
that in
amazing
itself is mind blowing to think like that Herzog did what Fitzcarraldo did in the movie. Pretty much
couldn't do that now.
No.
Yeah, the funny story about that is, so Kinski was well up for doing the role when he got phoned, and he turned up on set, and as soon as he seen the terrain, like his face dropped. Herzog was saying,
"Here we go again." Yeah,
yeah. Original actor was they wanted was Warren Oates, but he was at the time I think he was very ill. And he ended up dying just as the film premiered, I believe.
Right. Yeah. Warren Oates died way too young. Then he gets Jason Robards, who there is footage. It's in the Les Blanc documentary, and I think Herzog uses it in his documentary as well. There is some footage of him. He would have been a very different Fitzcarraldo. I mean, I love Jason Robards, but I mean, I can't picture it being anybody but Kinski.
Yeah.
Mario Adorf actually wanted to take on the lead role as well.
Apparently,
I think they sent him home, like, because I love Mario Adorf.
I don't know if he could play that. I don't know if that would.
I think he's a super. I think he's an underrated.
No, he's
actor.
great. Great actor.
We covered him. Yeah, we covered him a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? I would like to. Obviously, Kinski is just gold, isn't he? But I would like to see what he could have done.
Role, though. I don't know if that would have been for him.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
It would have been different. It would have been different. I mean, Adorf, Robards, Warren Oates, these are all great actors. But I mean, this brings up the question too of other things that Kinski was offered that he turned down for one reason or another, or things didn't work out. And it's like, you can't complain about the way certain things worked out, but at the same time, you would like an alternate universe kind of glimpse into how he would have played those parts.
Yeah. And to see Mick Jagger with Kinski, that'd have been pretty crazy.
A little different.
Yeah.
And you've got the story as well with the Indians. So they found Kinski so kind of, annoying that they offered Herzog to kill him. And Herzog turned around and said, well, I don't want you to do that because I still need him for filming. And then he kind of, tongue-in-cheek, he says he regretted, not telling them to kill him in the end. I know that was just tongue-in-cheek.
No, he's just being funny there, but it's true. I mean, apparently they were afraid of Herzog because Herzog was very quiet. I mean, and you can see all the behind-the-scenes footage. I mean, at least what they let us see. I mean, Herzog doesn't come across as explosive or temperamental. He's actually quite quiet, very stoic. And they were apparently afraid of him, whereas Kinski's outrages and flipping, that footage you just showed us a little bit ago, of him flipping out on Fitzcarraldo. That's him when he's saying, lick my ass, and everything else he's saying is flipping out on Walter Saxer, the production manager. They just thought he was ridiculous. They were like, do you want us to take care of him? No, for God's sake, I still need him.
And those people are very gentle kind of people. They when they touch each other's hands, it's very soft and all that stuff. So they're not used to all that chaos,
No.
So.
But this one done very well as well. Won a Golden Globe and BAFTA awards, and I think Herzog won the best director in Cannes. So yeah,
deservedly so.
We will come on to some of his other films in a little bit. I don't know how much time you got, Troy.
I could probably do about another half hour.
Oh,
Okay.
that's good. That's good. Because we'll come on to that. I know we touched on it a little bit earlier, but Cobra Verde. So, what's your thoughts on this one, Troy?
Oh man,
It's the weakest of the Herzogs. I think it's not. It's good. I find it a little bit uneven. I know Herzog indicated he doesn't like the first half of the movie, but he likes the second half of the movie. I'm not altogether sure. I kind of like that first part of the movie myself.
Because I've only seen about the first 40 minutes or so, and I like what I saw so far. So.
Yeah, and that's another one where, because of the way the film was shot and everything, you can't hear his voice on the soundtrack, unfortunately. So it is his voice in Nosferatu in both the German and English tracks. It is his voice on Wojciech. It is his voice on Fitzcarraldo, again in English and in German. But on Cobra Verde, it's not. It's an interesting film. It's it's kind of it's divided into two parts, and definitely when you get to the point where he kind of takes over as this kind of leader figure with this tribe, it's definitely very interesting, and it's a good film. I just don't think it's quite as focused as the other ones.
It's probably because Kinski as well, though. You think, or you think it's just the story or the script? Because
it could be Kinski. I mean, Herzog blamed, of course he would. He blames it on Kinski. It could be a combination of any number of different factors. I mean, bear in mind, a lesser Werner Herzog movie is still a good movie. I mean, he's one of those directors where, a lesser Polanski film, a lesser Melville, a lesser Fellini, a lesser Kurosawa. These are still good films. They're not anything to be ashamed of. So if that's the weakest of the five collaborations, it's still good.
Yeah. I think at this point as well, Kinski wanted he wanted the Paganini film to go ahead. He wanted Herzog as the director, so he's kind of dangling a carrot to him in a way. But funny, in one of the final scenes where he's dying in the ocean, and like Herzog said, it was like watching Kinski just completely burn, like his flame kind of burn out. But where he would get so irate and so, all of his tantrums and that, Herzog knew exactly how to like deal with him. He just let him do his thing, get so tired then that he just, can't do nothing else. And that's like, this was filmed in South Africa or South America, I should say, as well. But this is got the famous kind of account where he physically attacked Herzog for the first time. They done verbal kind of arguments throughout their, confrontations, but this come to blows, and I think that was it. Herzog said, I'm not going to deal with this no more.
No, he figured it had gone as far as it could, and he didn't see it. I think the mine had been veined, and there really wasn't anything else you could do. I mean, if you look at the films Herzog made afterwards, I don't see a role for Kinski. It doesn't feel like there's anything. I haven't watched any of them and think, oh my God, if only Kinski. Now, had he lived longer and everything, who knows? But certainly the movies that were following after that, it just wasn't, it wasn't something that really made much sense to continue. They'd already had five collaborations. Maybe they weren't always commercially hugely successful, but they were seen internationally. They were critically acclaimed. They won prizes. And again, I think without Kinski, Herzog's career would have been very different. And without Herzog, Kinski's career would have been very different.
Yeah, didn't Kinski try to take him to court over the Paganini film to direct?
I don't know about that. I'm not sure. That could be one of those rumors that goes around. I mean, he did try to get Herzog to do it. Again, well, if he was such a hack, why would you want that? But obviously he knew he wasn't a hack. He would say very disparaging things about directors in interviews and in his autobiography. He worked with Billy Wilder, one of the greatest directors in the world, Billy Wilder. He did Billy Wilder's last film, Buddy Buddy, back in 1981, and with Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon. Not a good film, unfortunately. It was a bad final movie for Billy Wilder, who made so many great movies. But he, if you see the behind the scenes footage that was shot on the set, Kinski is very like, oh, I'm working, this is amazing. He's one of the great directors. I'm so privileged. But then later he'd say, oh, Billy Wilder, he's just, he sucks. So everybody's terrible. I mean, he was very disparaging towards just about everybody. But especially this is where Kinski had the most problem, was when he was dealing with directors who were real autocrats, very dictatorial. So if they came at him trying to control him like a puppet, stand here, do this, take a pause, do this, he wouldn't have liked that. And certainly if they were temperamental and they tended to lash out at him and yell at him, he didn't take kindly to that. Whereas other directors like Freddie Francis, John Llewellyn Moxey, obviously Jess Franco, Antonio Margheriti, and others had no real problems with him.
Yeah, I saw where he was saying, like, what am I, your student? And I saw in one of his interviews, he's like, what am you trying to teach me something? I don't need. It's like telling the cameraman how to, he knows how to do his job, and all this shit.
Yeah,
it's funny listening to these interviews with him, though. It's like,
no, I mean, I can understand it. I mean, he was an artist. He definitely was bringing something to the table, and the directors he worked with most harmoniously, I think they understood that and kind of just let him do his thing. But Herzog had very specific ideas about what he wanted, and sometimes he would, as you were saying before, Darren, he would kind of provoke a rage, get him really pissed off, and then he would calm down, and then he would get that drained thing that he wanted out of him.
Right. So he kind of like manipulating him in a way.
Yeah, it works.
Right. I mean, Kubrick did the same thing. So, I mean,
well, Kubrick took it to certain extremes, perhaps, but certainly, I mean, there are different ways of approaching it. It's not, for me to say what's right or what's wrong, but Kinski in general, if directors treated him nicely and they were respectful towards him, he would be fine. But, it depended on different personalities. You mentioned Venom before. I mean, his problem on Venom wasn't Piers Haggard, the guy who took over from Tobe Hooper. It was, that relationship with Oliver Reed, which was just not a happy relationship.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall with them too.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Oh yeah.
But I was going to ask you if you had 5 Klaus Kinski films to recommend. Like, I don't know if that's putting you on the spot or anything, but like 5 of them that need to be seen, kind of.
I would say that definitely Aguirre, Nosferatu, Fitzcarraldo are essential films to see if you're interested in Kinski. The Great Silence is undoubtedly up there as well. I would say that's one of the great Italian Westerns, and he's terrific in it. He's terrifying in it, really. A 5th one, I mean, I could pick so many different movies. There are movies I have a great deal of fondness for, like Venom, which I wouldn't necessarily say is a great film as such, but I love the movie to death. I think it's so much fun. For a Few Dollars More is a great film. Dr. Zhivago is a great film. Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, Wojciech is amazing too. I mean, feel bad. It's like, you occupy the whole top 5 with 4 from Werner Herzog, but it's hard to get around them.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So he's definitely the best that he worked with. Herzog has to be, right?
He worked with some great directors. Again, Billy Wilder is a great filmmaker, extraordinary filmmaker in his own right. Sergio Leone, one of the great Italian directors.
Well, I mean, as far as many films as he did, he didn't do that many with Leone, though, right? He only did one.
Only did one, although he was, and I wish this would have happened. This would have been fascinating. He at one point was giving very serious thought to doing a remake of M, the great Fritz Lang movie about child murder with Kinski.
We just covered that, by the way.
Yeah, great film. Joseph Losey did a good remake in the 50s that very few people have seen, but it's actually really good. Leone was going to do a remake with Kinski in the Peter Lorre role. Well, what that would have been like.
Shit.
Oh, God, yeah. Just mentioning like a few more of his films. I saw one this week. I've never really heard much about it, called Das Nets.
With him and Mel Ferrer.
Yeah, that was an interesting film.
I like that.
You've got Mel Ferrer playing this kind of. It's not really a secret, is it, that he is the killer in this?
Mm-hmm.
Early on, and Kinski's this journalist, and he's kind of getting his story for the newspaper or the magazine that he's
blackmailing.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. I wouldn't, it's not going to be high up or anything. But
that's good. It's very good. And actually, Kinski and Ferrer are both really good in it. That's one of those movies I wish somebody would put out in a better edition.
Yeah, it was horrible, the edition I seen. You've got Elkie Summer in it as well. But
Oh,
no,
shit.
I would slightly recommend it to people.
I would, definitely recommend. Actually, thinking back, I mean, one of my, again, favorite movies. It's not a great Kinski showcase, but he is good in it. A movie I adore is Venus and Furs. So that's
I
good
do
one
as
for me
well.
too.
I
I
love that
like.
film.
Yeah, I do like it. Does that have a good edition? Do you know?
The only, I mean,
I've
it's
seen
a
a
perfectly it's a perfectly serviceable edition from Blue Underground as a DVD.
Okay.
There have been attempts to put out a better edition, but unfortunately, there's some rights issues, which I don't know if they'll ever get sorted out. I hope they do.
Yeah, I saw a really bad version. I think I seen it on Tubi or something. It was pretty bad print.
Yeah,
I've
the
got
Blue
the
Underground
DVD
disc
of
looks
that.
nice.
Okay.
Yeah. That film reminds me a lot of Short Night of Glass Dolls as well. Kind of, they got the thing going on in it. So I won't give it.
It's very dreamy. It's very dreamy,
Yeah,
and it anticipates a big. And I won't say anything because I don't want to ruin it for people who haven't seen it. But it anticipates a big blockbuster of the '90s in terms of a plot twist. So yeah, it's. I think it's Jess Franco's best film, and it's a movie I love dearly. And Kinski is one of three characters, the other played by Dennis Price and Margaret Lee, who are involved in this murder, and they get some just desserts served up to them. It's a hell of a film.
Right.
You got one, Dirk? You want to mention a film?
I think I've kind of gone through the ones. I mean, Footprints on the Moon. He's playing.
I love that film.
Dr. Blackman.
Yes.
But I mean,
Bolton's
it's still
probably
good.
one
I
of
mean,
the
he's
best.
not, he's not in it per se, bits and pieces. And then that's such an ambiguous film.
Yeah, he's all like it's a science fiction type thing where he's, it's black and white cutaways to him controlling some sort of experiment. And what it all means is very much open to interpretation. But it's a beautiful film. Shot by Vittorio Storaro, the great DP who shot things like Apocalypse Now and The Last Emperor and Last Tango in Paris. It's a beautiful film. Very strange, man. It's one of those movies that some people consider to be a giallo, others don't. It's definitely a very strange sort of quasi art house experimental film.
Yeah,
that's definitely. Luigi Pizzoni. I don't think I love all his films. I don't think he's made bad
I do too.
Definitely.
But I've got to mention this one film there because the whole history is insane about this one. So Nosferatu in Venice, 1988.
Yeah.
Luigi Cozzi's he does a brilliant chapter in the end of Troy's book. That is just, you have to read it and then go in and watch the film straight after. Now it's one of my favorite kind of films in a way. It's not great, and I'm not going to say that at all.
I like the film for the most part until the third act, and then it
kind of makes sense though, because the film wasn't finished apparently.
But then some of the shit where he's he's throwing people on spikes. I didn't understand that shit, but whatever.
It's an odd film, as you rightly note. Yes, it wasn't really quite finished as such. It has a very convoluted production history, and Luigi Cozzi talks about it. He's only able to really talk about his direct involvement and the things he was told. So there's a lot of other stuff that actually Eugenio Orcolani, my friend and sort of collaborator on a variety of projects, including a bunch of commentaries, we delve into on the track for Paganini. So that's also worth getting into because some of it slightly contradicts some of the information that's present on the extras of the excellent release from Severin. There's all these kind of contradictory stories, but Augusto Caminito is the producer of that film, ended up becoming the de facto director after a bunch of other people sort of tried and failed to direct the film and marshal it and put it together. He and Eugenio knew each other and he interviewed him in depth. So he's got a good grasp on the chronology of that. It's a very, very strange film. And you've got three big actors and you've got Kinski, who doesn't resemble at all what he played in the Herzog film because he refused to wear the makeup. Right. So he only has fangs, but he's wearing his long hair that he was wearing at the time. And it's a strange look if you're not expecting it. Christopher Plummer, who was apparently incredibly bemused by the whole thing, just sat back and watched the fireworks unfold and just was enjoying himself. And Donald Pleasance, who is an actor I love very much, who is not very good in the film. He has a really weird scene towards the end where he flips out, and it doesn't make any sense why he's yelling all of a sudden. It's like, I don't know what happened there, and I don't know if it's something missing footage or whatever, but it's not one of his better performances, I have to say. But it is a weirdly fascinating movie, especially with that strange backstory to it.
Similar tone to like in that Deodato film. Is it Phantom of Death? Is that the one?
Yeah.
Where he's, I mean, there's parts of it, he's just not that good. Like when he's screaming in the street, you know. And
but it's the only time. It's the only time in a movie you can hear him drop the F-bomb, so I'll forgive it.
Yeah. It's funny though.
But the history of that, like you say, I think three of the directors got paid off. Didn't Kinski as well? So they had a lead actress at the time was playing Barbara De Rossi's sister, and he wanted her gone as well. And he literally said, "You've got to get rid of her." And then he took a shine to one of the actor's girlfriends, this like Oriental girl, or this colored girl, as you would say. And she had no acting experience whatsoever, and he kind of wanted her to play this part, which is bizarre because he invented his own scenes as well. I
thought she was Sicilian or something. I didn't know.
The whole thing was just, it was such a mess. I mean, basically, it starts off with one director who kind of preps it, and then, you know, he falls out of it. And then, you know, Kinski, at one point, they bring in Mario Caiano, who was a veteran director who had done things like Nightmare Castle with Barbara Steele and Eye in the Labyrinth, Jallo from the 70s, and a very experienced director. And it just, everything just fell apart. And Kinski apparently, you know, did notionally anyway direct some scenes in the film again before Caminito took over, and just tried his best to just sort of marshal all of these elements and pull them together in a way that was hopefully coherent, but it really isn't. It was part of 3 films that they did. There was, this one was the first one to be shot. After that, he did a film called Grandi Cacciatori, which Kinski just flat out just left at one point. I think he went off to do Cobra Verde during that time. So the movie's very strange because it starts out with Kinski, then Kinski's character kind of disappears, and Harvey Keitel shows up to investigate. Harvey Keitel it was supposed to be Kinski the whole way through, but Kinski quit. He just ran off and did the movie with Herzog. And then by the time that was all taken care of, he comes back and he does Paganini, which in itself was a tremendous, just disorganized, chaotic, insane experience.
And the lead chick in Nosferatu in Venice, I was trying to place her, and we saw it in the Forgotten Jolly 7, right? Sweets from a Stranger.
Barbara De Rossi.
Yeah, it was driving me crazy. I couldn't figure out where I seen her from, but.
And Kinski met his last sort of partner in this group of films by Caminito. She wasn't an actress at the time. She was, I believe, the daughter of a local couple that ran a local kind of restaurant that Kinski and Caminito were frequenting, and she was working there for her parents as a waitress. And she was very young. I mean, she was over. I think she was at least 18, but I mean, it was a big age gap there because Kinski was already, you know, about 60 by this time. So I mean, it's a little sketchy, but. They were never married, but he did ask her to adopt the name of Kinski, but it was never really her last name. They were never actually married, but she was part of that period of time. They were together for a couple of years, and she ended up working with Tinto Brass later on. Obviously a very beautiful woman, quite voluptuous, but you know, she's part of that group of films as well. And then eventually that fell apart, and you know, like I said, he ended his days alone.
Would she be considered his 4th wife then?
Well, they weren't really married. They didn't actually get married, but they were together for a while. He did like the idea because also his son is in Paganini, so he liked having all these, you know, Kinski names in you know, so Klaus Kinski, Deborah Kinski, Nikolai Kinski, you know, and that really wasn't her name.
Now, I've seen where he only got along with his son, and toward the end, right?
He dumped on his son, and I think the two his daughters kind of resented him for that later on in life. And I know something's come out since his passing as well, which we'll touch upon. Don't have to go into all the gory details, but there's been a lot of sexual abuse allegations.
There are allegations. There was his daughter Paula, and Natasha is the famous one. She became quite a big star, and actually Kinski wanted to get her involved in Paganini as well. Some sources indicate that she was supposed to play a particular role. Other sources say a different part. I don't know for sure, but she took one look at. She was brought in by Caminito, looked at the footage that had been shot, said, "I am not participating in this. Don't even bother even calling me again. I will not only will I not work with my father, I'll never work with you because you're making this thing." So
Right.
she left, and she had nothing to do with it. Reportedly, yes. Unfortunately, it's a terrible thing that apparently, wow, I don't know. You know, he claimed things. He used to shock people and tell people, you know, I've done this, and like, what?
I don't know. What was it? He said that he had her before Polanski did.
Yeah. Yeah,
No.
something like that, because Polanski and Natasha had a relationship. She was of age by that time, I emphasize, because of Polanski's, kind of notorious reputation, but she was of age and it was consensual. But no, I mean, whatever. Regardless, in his autobiography, he talks a lot about his son, Nikolai, who looks a good bit like him. I've seen some things with him in it, and he is an actor. And you can tell he's got the eyes. He definitely has that intensity. But Klaus adored his son, Nikolai. Absolutely just talks about him nonstop throughout the last sections of the book, how much he adored him and everything. But his son, based on allegations and everything, wants nothing to do with, talking about his father, and has kind of just written that off altogether, which, if it's true, I don't blame him.
And he's the only one that showed up to his funeral too, right? Out of the three. So.
Out of the three, yeah. Well, I mean, if that's true, I can't blame them. It's pretty despicable. But again,
definitely. It's hard to tell what's real, what's not real, though. I mean, if somebody's trying to make money.
Well, yeah, sometimes. But in situations like this, I think it's important that people remain innocent until proven guilty. But at the same time, I find it very hard to believe that a child would make up a story like that about their father. Mm-hmm. So it's probably true, unfortunately, and it makes the whole thing very sort of icky. And unfortunately, it's quite despicable. But again, this is why I say separate the artist from the art. I mean, Polanski is another one who has a very convoluted and difficult legacy because of what happened in 1977, but he's a genius of a filmmaker. I can appreciate him as an artist. So, that debate wages on.
He did say something as well about Natasha when she was younger, that she was very sexual towards him, even though nothing, happened. She was kind of a very sexual young girl. And so I found that a little bit, like you say, you're never going to know.
I mean, if
there is free. Oh, go on, Dirk. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, if you think going all the way back to the early days of Hollywood, probably. I mean, if you could pull back the veil on everybody, I mean, people would be shocked.
Well, the things that went on during the so-called golden age and back in like the 20s and 30s, I mean, if people are shocked by some of the things they hear about somebody like Polanski, or to say nothing of people like, Kevin Spacey, or somebody like Woody Allen, who's so controversial, even though, in the eyes of the law, didn't do anything wrong. I mean, whatever you may make of that situation, he didn't really do. She wasn't underage. It wasn't rape. It was consensual. I mean, the whole situation is perhaps a little strange, but whatever you want to make of it. When you hear stories about people like Errol Flynn, for example, my God, people have no idea what a really truly debauched Hollywood figure truly is. But the way that things used to work, first of all, we didn't have social media. We didn't have 24-hour news coverage. We didn't have the ability to have cameras everywhere to sort of, document what was going on. And so things are all over the place. They had studio heads had relationships with the gossip columnists and kind of determine what was going to go into the press and what wasn't. So if they were okay with some dirt being out there about, I don't know, George Sanders, that was fine. Go ahead, because we're mad at him right now because he won't make this werewolf movie we want him to be in. But at the same time, don't say anything bad about William Holden or somebody like that. And, some of these people did some pretty terrible things. So, But again, it's art in general. I mean, you go back and think about, great sculptors, painters, musicians. I mean, Richard Wagner, terrible, terrible people when you think about it. I've always said that, there are some great filmmakers who were lousy people, but there are a lot of great people who were lousy filmmakers too.
Right,
That's
you've
true.
only got to look at Charlie Chaplin as well. There's a lot of controversy around
Oh,
him
yeah.
with younger girls. But what I will say on just last thing on Nosferatu in Venice is there's 3 scenes, like sex scenes with the females, you know, characters in that. And if you look closely, you can tell, you know, he's very hands-on in all his kind of sex scenes, I've noticed. And it is kind of uncomfortable watching those 3 scenes. But all the actresses apparently, you know, just fought him off and said, look, I'll stay on in the film, but as long as I'm not in a scene with him.
No, there was definitely that was true. And well, you ain't seen nothing yet. If you see a film he did in the early 80s, it was kind of notionally it was a spinoff of the story of O, called Fruits of Passion. It was a French-Japanese co-production by a Japanese director. Unsimulated sex in it. I mean, it's not porn, you can't see, but apparently, like, it was for real, and it seems like that's true. So, you know, that's
right.
You know, I mean, that's out there if you want to watch it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. David Hess mentioned that as well. That he had a couple of sex scenes that were for real in his films as well.
Hitchhike.
Notably, Hitchhike.
House on the Edge of the Park. Yeah. Well, I mean, apparently, that was his. I don't know if it was his ex-wife or his, eventual ex-wife. It was his then partner who, you know, he basically rapes at the beginning of the film. So, you know,
yeah,
whatever.
Deodato spoke about that, right?
Yeah,
like Deodato.
I think,
he said that was so
there's a
hard
one scene with
the film or whatever. Yeah,
the one scene with Annie Bell. You know, the one out of Absurd, the blonde hair. I think that's the scene he's supposed to have been for real.
Could be. Looks it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. Do you want to go any further into the Kinski filmography? You probably pressed for time, Troy.
I mean, it's been an hour and a half, so I'm probably good. But if there are any things else you'd like to talk about, feel free while I'm here. I can certainly, if there's anything else you want to touch upon.
I'm
Do you want to touch upon a couple of his quotes, Dirk, before we go? Or
sure.
Yeah. So like that's what I was gonna. I'm sure that's where the name of the book, like Real Depravities, was from that quote, right? Or is that?
Yeah. What did he say? Virtues can be fake, but depravities are real, and it just seemed to make perfect sense. And of course, you could also be very punny with it and make it REEL depravities.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it seemed highly appropriate. I mean, the whole idea behind the book was, you know, all these kinds of documentaries and retrospectives and stories about Kinski, they always focus on, oh, what a nut he was, all these awful things he did and everything. And I understand the fascination with that, but it goes back to what I said. He's one of the most compelling screen presences in the history of the cinema. There's nobody else really quite like him. We pointed to some other people who have similar kind of intensity and have a similar kind of screen presence, but he's unique. And, he's amazing because even when he's clearly phoning it in, we've mentioned Slaughter Hotel, and there are other movies where you can tell he's just completely bored. He doesn't give a damn about what he's doing. He's just kind of walking through it for a paycheck. You still watch him. He's an amazing screen presence. And I wanted to do a book that would, first of all, kind of bring together all the films and give a good sense of how many movies he really did do. But then also kind of talk about what he brought to them and what made him such a great actor.
Right. Not focusing on all the controversy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of that in there. I mean, it can't be helped. And, you know, there are stories that I was told for the book, you know, about the way he carried on certain sets. And I put them in there. But, you know, mostly it's about the work.
The films. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we were trying to do. You know, obviously got to touch it. You can't do a Kinski kind of retrospective without touching upon, but we didn't want it to be all about, you know, controversy this screen because we love his films at the end of the day. But some of his quotes that you have in the book are like, so this is one. He says, I believe that the female teachers get turned on when they make us bend over. Before they cane us, I'd love to tear down the panties of some randy teacher, shut slut, and whip and bear her ass until the cane goes into smithereens. Man, only Kinski can come out with something like that.
Yeah, that one quote for Herzog, though, where you got it right there.
When he's on about the llama in the canoe.
Well, when he's talking about Herzog, talking about his brain swelling and exploding, a snake biting him, and some really.
It was very vivid.
Yeah,
it's very descriptive.
So I can quickly say that one, and we could sort of go out on this is the last one if you want. So today, Herzog, this is Kinski talking, ties up a llama in a canoe and sends it tearing down the rapids. I found out about the llama only when it's too late. Now I hate the killer's guts. I shriek into his face that I want to see him croak like the llama he executed. He should be thrown alive to the crocodiles. An anaconda should strangle him slowly. A poisonous spider should sting him and paralyze his lungs. The most venomous serpent should bite him and make his brain explode. The huge red ant should piss into his eyes and gobble up his balls and his guts. Man, I think that's possibly one of the best quotes to go out on.
Yeah, that was pretty rough. It was like, holy shit.
But no, I just got to thank Troy again for doing this, you know. Third time on. Hopefully we can get you on again at some point, and we'll, you know, have a good subject and all that. But have you got anything you want to promote, Troy, and books-wise or commentaries or whatever?
Yeah, anything you can mention or that's coming?
Books. The most recent one is called Innocence Lost. Robert Sigo and the Curse. If I could speak clearly, Innocence Lost. Robert Sigo and the Curse of Lorraine, which is about the German director Robert Sigo, who made a great debut in the late '80s with a film called Lorraine, which is a kind of unheralded horror masterpiece. One of the great horror films of its period that very few people have talked about, although it's getting more attention these days. Had an unfortunate career, hasn't really had the opportunities that he deserved. Kind of a project I undertook knowing that it wasn't going to generate as much interest as certain other things because the topic is so niche, but I felt it was worth writing, and I'm very happy with it. So it's out now. Commentary wise, I lose track of what's been announced, but I know that just recently Treasured Films announced The Last Shark, which Eugenio Ercolani and I did the commentary for that. So that is a specifically Region B release. It has to be contractually, because if you know anything about The Last Shark, it's not a movie that Universal really wants you to see. So it's not, you can import it, you can buy it, but you have to have a region-free player if you're in the US. And if you like Jaws and Jawsploitation, it's certainly an essential link in that chain.
Oh yeah, and y'all did a great job, man. We did cover this in detail, in depth, like the House of the Doom set. That was great job y'all did.
Well, we got from that same company, Brivido Jallo is coming out soon from Cauldron, the box set of the 4 Lamberto Bava Brivido Jallo TV movies. That was a lot of fun to do too. So I'm glad a lot of these late 80s TV projects that people like Lamberto Bava and Umberto Lenzi and Lucio Fulci were doing around that time are finally getting nice additions, because they're important parts of their filmography.
And that Bravado Jallo I got coming pre-ordered.
Yeah, we'll be doing a stream on that. But last thing, Troy, is last time we spoke to you, I think you touched upon maybe like a Jallo book in general, of kind of an overview. Has that come along in any way, or is it still?
I've got an outline. I've got an outline planned. There's a book project that I've been working on in collaboration with Eugenio, which has taken considerably longer than anticipated. So until that one's finished, I don't want to move on to anything else. I'm waiting for that to kind of be completed, and hopefully it will be within the next couple of months, and then I can move on. I've started the book on Alberto De Martino, the director of movies like The Antichrist and Blazing Magnum. So
the best Exorcist ripoff.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's a really good film. So I've got that, and yes, I am looking to do kind of a overview of the Jallo, which instead of doing the kind of year by year catalog, encyclopedia approach, we'll kind of look at different trends and break it down in a different way. So that is definitely on the slate.
Awesome. Yeah, can't wait.
But yeah, man, I can't thank you enough for coming on, man. And you have officially been on the EuroCrypt, or down in the EuroCrypt.
Down in the EuroCrypt. Well, it's very nice to be here, and I thank you both for your interest. And yes, anytime, let me know. As long as schedules align, I'm happy to come back.
Yeah, and if you would just hold tight while I end the stream for just a minute, and and then I'll talk to you just for a minute before we get out of here.
Sure.
But we're gonna get out of here. I appreciate everybody. Sorry I couldn't catch the chat today, but y'all have a good one. Have a good week.
Have a good one, guys.